All right, welcome. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our last session of the day. I'm in a slightly new recording setup for myself, so please notify Rob or myself if there's something iffy with my sound. This is a relatively new microphone, and I haven't worked out all the kinks. Alrighty, this session we'll just dive into it. Me and my colleague Leah Hauge are going to present on integrating digital literacy into low-level English learning classes to look at the tricky problem of where do we want to address digital literacy in a beginning ESL context, whether that's as teachers or whether that's as a support staff member like myself. And hopefully, we hope to answer a lot of relative concerns or to give you inspiration to go on your own journey. All right, a little bit about ourselves. My name is Nicholas Houlson. I'm a digital navigator for Open Door Learning Center, a program of Literacy Minnesota. How many people in the chat, I'm curious, have heard of Literacy Minnesota? I think quite a few across the AB landscape. Yeah, so as many as I see quite a few people. Megan Boyle saying sounds quite familiar. She's a staff member with us. Megan, I hope to refresh your memory. Open Door Learning Center is an ESL school, and in the ABE landscape, we currently have two campuses in Minneapolis and St. Paul. We at our Minneapolis campus and our Arlington Hills, St. Paul campus, I believe we serve ESL levels 0 to 6, divided across 3 classes. My own role is a support staff member. I'm a digital navigator, and that kind of translates to coaching or filling gaps. So I help students with their devices. If they need to join in one of our online classes, for example, but aren't sure how to work Zoom on their phone, or have forgotten an email password, my job is to pull the student out and help coach them on that. I also teach several digital literacy classes and oversee a lot of the labs in the Minneapolis campus. My colleague is Leah Hauge, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Friday. My name is Leah, and I work with Literacy Minnesota in our North Star project. Maybe I'll ask how many people are familiar with North Star, and if you are, you can call it out in the chat. In my role, and I see a lot of familiar names. Hi, everybody. I work to support the development of all of our resources for North Star. So that's our assessments, our North Star online learning interactive practice modules, and our in-class curriculum. And really enjoy that work and connecting with people throughout the country in Minnesota. And we're excited to share with you today. So I'll hand it over to Nick to talk about our objectives.
Alrighty. So if you're in this session, you might have computers in the brain, or at least digital literacy on the brain. And indeed, our objectives are to highlight 2 to 3 resources that we use to help teach digital literacy, to kind of go over these resources, provide kind of a crash course on how to use them, as in-depth as we can get in a conference presentation. Go over some of the reasons why we use these resources, what needs do they fulfill, or what advantages do they have in the ESL classroom or ABE landscape, and to identify any needs that have emerged that these meet, and to help you, as I mentioned at the beginning, either develop a plan or get the first inklings of a plan. We want this presentation to be useful, and we hope by the end of it, when you walk away, you're at least thinking strategically about how to use all of these digital resources, whether it's the ones that we bring up or something that you might have been aware of before. All right, let's start with a warm-up.
Yeah, so just to get to know who's with us today a little bit better, if you could choose one of the questions on the screen, so you don't have to answer both, just share with us maybe what brought you to this session today. Or you could also share, if you choose, how often does class get interrupted by issues with tech in your world? And maybe you could include anything from cell phones to printer disruptions to having troubleshooting issues for online classes. So kind of share maybe a pain point that you're having with tech. And we'll give a little bit of time, some writing time, some think time. Thanks, Danielle. I think you're cool too.
While everybody's writing, I'll use this opportunity to get on my soapbox and complain about a pain point that I experience when I oversee labs is getting students at all ESL levels, whether they're at the advanced level or the very beginning level, to understand the difference between usernames and passwords. That takes a lot of energy. We have yet to fully crack it, and more often than not, we find students have managed to get into all sorts of trouble, whether or not it's logging into a student account or logging into a guest account on a Chromebook that we use for lab.
Yeah, and I think that's a common problem, Nick. We also did this session yesterday and we heard from people that's a big one. We have some folks who'll be leading classes coming up this year, and so doing some planning now. Someone who wants to integrate digital literacy more, being conscious about that, opening links as a specific skill to work with students. Um, yeah, using available computers in a worthwhile way, and really being intentional about planning around that. We know that our students are relying on helpers maybe at home if they're joining remote classes. Jill gave an example of that. So maybe helping students to build those skills on their own. Gmail passwords. Yes, Amanda.
Yeah.
So many
Larry,
things here.
yeah, Larry T says a wide variety, at least once a week. Projector, computer, or something.
Yeah. So we really hope that today we can offer some solutions, and definitely identifying those pain points is a first step in figuring out what you're going to teach to students. So maybe we will talk about our agenda and we'll show you a little bit. Thank you everyone for sharing.
Alrighty.
So in our time together today, we're going to share why integrating digital literacy skill routines and why routines specifically are a really great place to start, a worthwhile place to start for all of the things that you just shared in the chat. This can be a helpful strategy. We are going to share a few resources, 3 specific resources. And the cool thing about all of these resources is they are free and available to you right away. And you will have time in breakout rooms to explore them just a little and to maybe start to think about a first step that you might take with those resources in your specific teaching context. And we will also, and for each resource, we're going to be sure to tell you what it is and where you can find it, where you might start. We'll give examples of what it could look like in real life. And then, like I said, we'll give you that time in breakouts to unpack just a little, and we'll have a wrap up. So I will turn it over to Nick to talk a little bit about the why for the routines in digital literacy.
Yeah, we'll go over why is digital literacy important. And I think at this point, post quarantine and post reopening, and stretching even further back for industry veterans post the digital revolution and the explosion of computers, this seems pretty self-evident that why is digital literacy so important? What is digital literacy? The quote on screen has a very formalized, standards friendly kind of language. This is our formal way to say it. You might also say digital literacy is simply being able to fluently use a device to be able to understand what's happening on the screen, to be able to give a name to what you're doing. Are you using a mouse or are you clicking? Why is that important? Because it's so fully integrated into our daily lives that it's become inextricable. This study from the National Skills Coalition in 2023 found 92% of jobs now require digital skills. I would imagine that's across the entire spectrum, whether it's working a touchscreen as a cashier or having to use Microsoft Office Suite in an office setting or an educational setting, all the way up to the big wigs who might do some advanced algorithm or whatnot at NASA. The computer is inescapable, and so it falls to us in ABE. If it's something that's basic and foundational, we have to provide instruction for it. So why build in digital literacy routines? Why include digital literacy in your instruction? Because it will help students parse the world, make the world more understandable, and it helps ourselves to be able to address these concerns, some of which are incredibly relevant. I myself have learned a thing or two just by Googling how to reset a password that not only benefits a student, but helps myself either professionally or personally. Minnesota has included digital literacy skills as part of our standards, as mentioned. Because so many of these skills are integrated into students' daily lives, they overlap heavily with the Transitions Integration Framework, or the TIF skills. Those of you who are super familiar with our CCRS standards will probably be familiar with these 60% of the pie chart. That in addition to academic skills, if we're readying our students for ABE or ESL, English in the workplace, we also need to help them navigate uh, either digital concerns or just standard stuff like dealing with bureaucracy, paying your taxes. And as I said before, this section of the pie chart, digital literacy skills, the lime green section, is integrating even more so with our transition skills. This is a pretty relevant skill. From I can think off the top of my head, an example that I had this week was understanding how much money is on my bus card. How do I check online to see how much money is on my bus card so that I can either get to school or get to my job or get to a child care center? Another question, why routine specifically? Leah and I will kind of share the slide going over why we think a digital literacy routine, what is it and how do we do it? A lot of you might know off the top of your head what a routine is, something that's easy to repeat and plug and play. But go ahead, Leah, take the mic for a moment. Why should we
Yeah.
build in digital literacy routines?
Yeah, and I'm sure you all can tell that Nick and I, we really love routines. And as when you work in digital literacy, it's just we have seen the most success for learners. And we hear at North Star with all of our sites nationwide that this is how learners are building digital literacy skills, is that opportunity to really practice and practice often and practice with support. And so it's a good place to start because it's chunking things into kind of the bite-sized instruction where, like Nick was talking about, you can integrate it into authentic practice, but really starting small. And digital literacy can feel overwhelming for students, but also for instructors. So just really finding a smaller place to start. It will fit into your current instruction. So when you're thinking about integrating it into those other two categories with the CCRS and content instruction, then of course building soft skills, balancing all that. Just thinking about this in terms of routines can really make it doable in like 10 to 20 minutes of your instruction per day or a couple times a week. We know that repetition helps students build skills in all areas, whether that's language or digital literacy. Also, repetition, of course, reduces stress in the classroom. It allows learners it makes your lessons more predictable, which is helpful for you and students, helps students build their confidence. And of course, it's very helpful for those beginning language learners to have that repetition of both digital skills, but also the language that you're introducing around those. And I'll let Nick talk a little bit about why he's
Yeah.
excited about routines.
So the number one thing that I think about when I think about digital routines, whether or not they involve merely students reviewing a distance learning platform like a reading or a phonics activity on MobiMax, which is one of the DL platforms we use. Shout out if you are familiar with MobiMax. Also, shout out if you're frustrated with MobiMax sometimes. uh, Whether or not we use a DL platform to just build a basic computer lab routine, like 15 minutes on a vowel exercise, or whether it's something a bit more intensive, like running a North Star assessment and having students chew through one lesson at maybe an hour a day, if there's an hour dedicated lab, for example. Uh, I really find that these are useful for, we have all these resources online. People have built tons of stuff. MobiMax is just one of thousands of digital resources. We want to be able to use those to offload our own labor, right? We want to be able to point students and say, here's a routine that you know how to do. Once you're trained on it, you can do this independently without constant supervision. It promises to be a time saver, and it promises to be a way to offload labor. And that's one thing that we really want to see is to help us develop ourselves professionally by giving ourselves space, right? by letting ourselves uh by letting ourselves use these resources and stop reinventing the wheel. I think the other thing, which Leah brought up, is that this expands our repertoire. It expands our knowledges. A common problem that I had when I first started out in ESL was I would have all these great distance learning platforms. They would promise all these things. I'm thinking specifically of USA Learns and MobiMax. They would promise that my students would get vocab gains, they would get level gains, they would understand civics in USA Learns case. But I didn't really have time to go through and untangle them. I didn't have time to turn them into something I knew as opposed to a black box. If I have the space to develop routines, I can make my curriculum more predictable. I can begin scope and sequencing. The scope and sequencing is a lot easier. A lot of what I'm saying is a matter of course and kind of reflective of an ideal scenario. We all wish that we had more time to do this. And like Leah said, we hope that this conference or this presentation can serve as the beginning of that journey for yourself. We'll be talking about a few other resources at the very end to provide you with the space and time to help develop these routines and to really insert them in kind of a plug and play manner. All right, I'm going to go to the next slide and begin talking about the DART curriculum. So we're going to shift to talk about the resources that we found really helpful. And DART is one of those resources. DART is not a distance learning platform like I've been talking about. It is a set of curriculum. It is a curriculum, a supplemental curriculum. DART originated as digital access and resilience for Texans. It was developed to fill a gap in early ESL instruction. It's thinking of people who are either fresh to learning English or people who are still at the beginnings of there. They don't have skills down like phonics. The reading skills are low. Before even grammar, they don't understand what sounds vowels make. And DART wants to target relevant areas of digital literacy, whether those are related to mobile, helping somebody who is new to the country understand something like a mobile text interface so that they can communicate with friends, relatives, support network easier. Or if they can understand something, if they are even pre-numeracy before numbers, how do they understand something like a number pad at an ATM machine? DART is looking at these very foundational digital literacy skills. I, however, am not teaching in Texas. So technically, when I use this curriculum, I'm teaching DARM, Digital Access and Resilience for Minnesotans. DART first began as a collaboration between the Texas Center for Advancement of Literacy and Learning, hosted out of a university, and Tyson Foods. They created a initial program that was all about helping migrant workers and other worker populations understand Tyson's proprietary software, things like Tyson's version of a time card, a Tyson web portal, things like that. They relied heavily on collaboration with North Star, and after the project had been concluded, decided to build a general curriculum. This curriculum they decided to make available under the Creative Commons license. It's free. And at the end of this presentation, we'll be linking to that website so you know where to download it. The intended audience for DART are, again, anybody who's kind of at an ESL level 3 or lower. They do provide tips for people who are advanced levels, but those are a bit self-explanatory since they expect people at ESL levels 4 or higher to possess English fluency sufficient to do a lot on their own. Oops, ignore this CASA score thing. I apologize. This should have been erased. Pretend it does not exist. So it is supplemental, as I mentioned before. Dart functions or thrives really well as an additional class in our own setting at Literacy Minnesota under Open Door. I hold this class about twice weekly, and it's before main ESL classes. It catches early comers and it hopes to build upon what either they've learned before, what they learned last week, or to warm them up for today's English literacy class. Let's dive into my experience teaching Dart. I started teaching this curriculum about late September, early October. And out of the 20 or 16, so out of the 16 lessons, I apologize, out of the 16 lessons, I got to around lesson 7 in that time. There were a few challenges, which I'll go over, but there were a lot of successes. There's a lot of things that I'm really happy about when I use this curriculum. Our school has a ViewSonic smartboard to set up. I use WhatsApp because the curriculum is very mobile friendly. I'll have students join a WhatsApp group for the class. And this is how we'll practice looking as a group at what everybody is typing, whether or not spelling is correct, whether or not punctuation is correct. We can share WhatsApp on our ViewSonic through a third-party app called Reflector. And outside of class, I reinforce Dart lessons about keyboarding with the website typing.com. Out of curiosity, how many people in the chat are familiar with typing.com? Is it a familiar resource? I see quite a few yeses. It's very useful. It's like a sequel to Mavis Beacon for those who might not be familiar. It does have limits, but as a tool to teach either the alphabet or typing hand positions, I find it very useful, a very useful tool to complement Dart. Lessons 1 through 6, roughly the first, a little bit over a fourth or third of Dart, covers alphabet, keyboard, numbers, letters, and symbols on the keyboard. Specifically, the symbols on the number row. I'm looking down at my own keyboard. And those by that kind of, if you're familiar with the standard keyboard layout, that kind of bracket of keys from backspace to enter to shift. Dart also in lesson 7 to 8 moves on to covering username and password, as well as some grammatical things. An example of a vocabulary that I've been working on recently, the last 2 weeks, me and my beginning level English students have been practicing phrases like above, under, and next to. I mentioned that there are a lot of challenges, and although I'm familiar with ESL, my previous experience was largely coaching GED or intermediate to advanced ESL students. So I was used to students who are kind of post phonics and really ready, they're really hungry for complex vocabulary. So what you'll hear from me today for more experienced teachers might be, oh, there's a first time ESL teacher who's having his first time teaching beginning students. So add me to your repertoire of examples of learning the hard way. I have a multi-level classroom. Dart is meant for low-level students, but in our setup, our 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock hour, I'm kind of catching every student uh, before they join class. So I have students from our intermediate English classroom, along with students from our higher level beginner classroom. And they are sitting next to students in our beginner level, the square zeros, if you will. So some people will get things like the aforementioned, oh, what does above mean? What does below mean? They'll get them lickety split. Other people will still be figuring out why does S and H make the sh sound in the word shift? Normally S is a s sound. I had a colleague a while back say if you have more than one student in your classroom, you have a multi-level classroom. And for me, this is true. I have about 16 students on a busy day, and therefore I have a 16 level classroom. A lot of so I'm learning myself how to teach a lot of beginner students how to teach things like phonics or how to teach letter and number recognition. Another major challenge is that our organization moved recently. This building is new. So we had long pauses in class. We had a 2-week pause in December where we needed to get our computer lab up and running, and we needed to prepare people for several distance learning contests, which we had over break. So there was a little bit of lost progress. My Dart class was interrupted a lot, and I had to learn how to deal with that. And going back briefly to the multi-level challenge, most of my students were kind of here. And under Dart's schema, it recommends about 35 to 45 hours of instruction for a first-time run-through of the whole curriculum. But there's a solid handful who are here. And for me, it's still an open question of whether or not Dart is the right curriculum for them. If I had infinite resources and a number of either volunteers or paraprofessionals who could take this solid handful, about 4 to 5 students, and give them more individualized instruction, I would still recommend this curriculum. But if you lack those resources, they may be sitting in class a little confused while everybody else pulled ahead. And that's a problem we're still trying to solve. Other tips for using this curriculum: the first 6 lessons of Dart are all about learning the alphabet and the keyboard with typing. It pays to really have a close-up view of your hands, like a camera, which zooms in on your hands, and if you project it to the class, that's one setup that we tried. Another setup is that everybody seated at tables, and I would kind of be at the center, and I would display to each table group what my hand position is, where my fingers should be. This is very important. Sometimes half of typing and half of digital literacy, a lot of it is muscle memory. So showing people where the muscles go and helping to build that. Keeping things simple. In this example, a student asked me, what does the enter key do? And the real answer is it does everything under the sun. The enter key can be a click, it can go forwards, it can go backwards. If you're in Microsoft Word, it can add a line. How do you communicate this to a beginning level ESL student? You kind of just say it can do many things, and you move on before they say like what? Like what, teacher? Many things like what? They say, oh, we'll cover it later. So keep it simple. They're just here to know the name at this level. And the other major tip, I'm going to skip to the bottom there, is get your beginning students to read. Treat Dart vocab, digital literacy vocab on some level is just the same as any other word. Click has that short I vowel. Click, eh. Get them to practice that. It's English like any other. It's you need them. You can't put the cart before the horse. They need to be able to read even simple words. If it's username and password, they need to be able to parse those words. All right. So that's my summary of Dart. It's a really great curriculum. I would recommend it. Like I said at the end of this presentation, we'll have a link to it, and it should be free to use. The second of 3 resources I wanted to talk about was the EdTech Strategy Toolkit. I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about resources to find digital literacy routines. Earlier in this conference, we harped on why routines were great, routine this, routine that. But it really helps us. It would behoove us to show you where you can find some examples, a repository of information about how to do some stuff. Maybe some examples from teachers who've successfully done this. So we're going to look at this resource hosted by the EdTech Center out on the East Coast, and we're going to take a brief field trip over there. First, I got to get out of presentation mode. Let's go over to the EdTech Center's website. So this toolkit was built a while back as an attempt to share a lot of knowledges. How many people in chat have heard of the Digital Skills Library? Anybody? Now, this is kind of a parallel resource. I see one no. We'll be going over that one as well. These are both big buckets. They're both places where people can upload finished or completed routines involving digital literacy. And think of it kind of like a resource to help do research on what routines might be attractive, what styles or methods might work for your classroom or in your context. I'm going to view this resource. This resource was made like a mobile app. It's really a website. You'll access it on the EdTech Center's website, but it'll pretend to be an app. I'm going to go full screen. Megan asked, did Rob do a tutor tip on that? Yes, recently. I believe it was the last tutor tip. Anyway, so here's our toolkit. I have to move my Zoom controls out of the way. The controls are on the bottom. They're divided into integrations, EdTech tools, and digital skills. So this is the organizational schema. If you go to something like integrations, you'll see several categories. And various routines and tutorials are included under these categories. Each of these will link to an informational resource. This particular routine is about practicing video chat. It'll include some basic info about the routine. It will highlight what digital skills this routine is meant to practice. If I click on it, Oops. There we go. If I click on it, I can go to where the routine was originally hosted and explore more. Let's go to EdTech Tools. These are various other resources that you might be curious about learning how to use. I'm going to go to text plus chat messaging and try to find a good tool there. Here we see Remind, WhatsApp, Talking Points. I'm going to click on WhatsApp. No reviews. I was hoping for some. I might upload a review after this. So, basic rundown about what this resource is, about how to use it, a link to WhatsApp support page. So again, EdTech Tools, a resource. These are resources that you might be interested in exploring, divided into several categories. And finally, the digital skills category. The digital skills in question, these categories, were developed by the Seattle Digital Equity Initiative. I believe their framework is kind of parallel to North Star, not exactly. I really like how they cut their skills into user-focused domains. So what I like about North Star is, as a teacher, it tells me, here are all these standards. Here's a list of skills that we'd like to see a student master in order to be considered literate or digital, to have full digital fluency. The Seattle framework, on the other hand, looks at it from a user end and asks, is this the area of concern that a learner has? Is a learner worried about their mobile device? Is a learner worried about communicating, workplace concern, etc.? If I go to the mobile device, I'll see several categories which I find very easy to understand to learners, and again helps you and the learner identify what these skills are in a more common language approach. I don't dislike how North Star phrases its skills. I just find this to be more accessible from a student's perspective. And again, these skills aren't mutually exclusive. They both are ultimately describing the same phenomenon. Let's identify some basic mobile features. An example of the skill, what the skill is, various resources to help explain these skills. A shout out to this resource in particular, GCF Global. Our organization has a partnership with Goodwill, who authored this resource. And we use it for students who are kind of graduating from North Star, but would like more to chew on. They host a lot of stuff on there. Sample activities plus strategies. Currently, there are no routines in this library. Oh no. Earlier, I mentioned the Digital Skills Library, which is a parallel resource hosted by the same organization, the EdTech Center. And they will have a more robust list of sample activities and strategies. If this toolkit doesn't have a sample for your desired outcome, the Digital Skills Library is a good backup. All right, I hope that was useful. I know this is a pretty quick crash course, and I've been talking a lot, and it's Friday, so sometimes our brains wander. But we're going to snap back. Well, we're going to snap back to our Google slide and engage in some breakout room discussion. Let's go back to slideshow mode. So I've talked quite a lot about these two resources, and now it's our time to give our brains some aerobics workout, give ourselves a little stretch and conversation to get the blood pumping. Please look in the chat for a handout, but these questions will also be on screen for your breakout room. So go ahead, Gail, sort the audience into breakout rooms. We'll take about 5 minutes, and I look forward to hearing what you come up with. All right, welcome back. I still see. Are there anybody still in the breakout rooms? I don't think so. I think everybody should be back right now.
Yes, everyone's back.
All right. So I hope you had a breakout session. I know that breakouts sometimes either they seem like they drag on forever or that there's just barely enough time to really get to the interesting point of the conversation. For better or for worse, I hope it was the latter and that you had some engaging conversation. A question, what was the website again? Are you referring to the toolkit that we went over? Rob, if you could drop that link in the chat again. Thank you very much. That should be on the handout. All right, so once again, to repeat Gail's message, if you have video off to preserve bandwidth, please disable video. I always feel mixed about that because I love seeing a bunch of faces. Anyway, so what did you guys talk about? Feel free to enter in the chat which of the resources interested you in, whether it was Dart, which is a more specific resource, just a curriculum, or the toolkit, which aims to be a repository. I'm very interested into hearing comments, criticisms, or ideas for future next steps involving either resource. See, Heather and Jacqueline are both excited about Dart. Lots of Dart. Does anybody have any specific thing, a reason why they find Dart intriguing? Robert Turner, I'd like to check out Dart or Darm, as it were. As the bard says, first, do no Darm. Heather says EdTech might be interesting because it's a different organization. They do a lot. And between the two resources that I'll talk about, the Digital Literacy Toolkit and the Digital Skills Library, they aim to be a very thorough database of digital EdTech resources, of how to use educational technology in our setting. Megan says, Dart sounds that sounds appropriately scoped. I agree, and I found it encouraging when I was going through Dart and feeling a little down that my students had to maybe spend 2 weeks on, for example, unit 1 or 2 about the alphabet. And Dart said that's okay. They don't know what they don't know. So it's okay to take a slower approach. Heather likes tools that think outside the box. I hope that we're providing you some tools to disassemble the box and explore the Wild West. Jacqueline is interested in low-level computer classes using North Star Computer Basics. Dart does have computer basics in mind. So North Star has those first three modules about computer basics. Dart was designed off of those standards. All right. Leah, should we move on to the second phase of the presentation?
I think so. It's exciting to hear what everybody's excited about.
Yeah. Would tell me I'll show Dart to our computer basics teacher. Thanks. Let us know what they think. If they love it, hate it, dislike the acronym. All right, I'm going to hand the baton off to Leah, who will be talking about routines and a new resource that she has helped build.
Thank you, Nick. Yes, I will be talking about routines to build essential digital literacy skills in EL classrooms. And along the lines of a lot of the things that Nick shared, just really thinking about how we can keep it simple. Of course, in the Dart resources and also in the ed tech resources from ed tech, there's so many of them, but all of them, once you find exactly what it is you're looking for, aim to really build those routines again or keep it simple with repetition for your classes. And of course, we do that with the North Star curriculum too, but that's written at that little bit of a higher level. So I think we can go to the next slide and I'll talk about why we created this. And it is for that reason that we heard from many of our sites across the nation that the North Star curriculum is great, but where do you start? So, and especially from our sites that are also working with learners who are building language skills simultaneously along with digital skills. How do they begin to integrate those digital skills into the classroom successfully before as a scaffold up to those North Star lessons that we already have? So we created this as a support for you. And of course, as a support for students, for beginning EL students and above classrooms. Really, it would work for any level, but it's thoughtfully scaffolded down to the appropriate level for beginning. So what is it? It's a resource to guide incorporating basic digital literacy routines into a classroom. The resources are free. Another cool thing about them is they're customizable. So we built all of these lessons in Google Slides, which was a request from our sites to have something that you can make a copy of and change around and maybe implement into something that you already create for your classes. Also works well for remote instruction. As I mentioned, these resources scaffold up or connect to the North Star standards and the North Star lessons. Additionally, we also thought about how these very beginning level skills that we're targeting in the routines support learners to show to meet CCRS standards that are outlined in our English Unlocked curriculum. So that's the curriculum that Literacy Minnesota publishes for EL learners. So we've also given examples of how you could extend the learning and authentic practice through that curriculum. So I'll show you that. And most importantly, these routines support the development of digital resilience. And that's really what we are aiming for in all of these digital resources that we're sharing. And whenever we're working with students, is supporting students to build that agility to perform and figure out how to complete digital tasks in new digital learning environments using the skills that they have built. My colleague yesterday gave me another definition of this that I really loved, which was learners with high digital resilience may feel empowered rather than fearful when asked to perform a familiar task on an unfamiliar device. So if you think about like how do you feel? Maybe if you feel like you have strong digital literacy skills, if you're given a new device, how do you navigate that? How do you coach yourself? What strategies do you use to problem solve? What does your productive struggle look like? Of course, there might be frustration and pain points, but how do you get through that? Those are all the skills that we really want learners to build along with those language skills. Excuse me. Yes, I love the idea of digital resilience. And at North Star, in our team, that's what we're always thinking about. Um, so let's look at the next slide and I'll show you some of the resources. We're going to explore two important components of the resources first, and then I'm going to show you how they're organized and how you find them. But first, I just want to give you a visual of what these are. And as I mentioned, you can access all of these for free. In fact, everything that I'm going to show you today is all accessed through the teacher guide, which is in the participant folder for this session. So you'll be able to look at this. And we'll have a breakout after I'm done talking where you'll get to look at this and unpack it a little bit too. So I'll start by just showing you one of the lessons in Google Slides. So Nick's going to take us there. Thank you, Nick. So this is one of the Google Slides lessons. And again, our aim was to create something that's easy to use, beginning English language level, a routine that you could implement again and again, because we know that repetition is really important. We also wanted to create those visuals so that you have everything in one place. It's easy to grab, hopefully makes planning a lot easier for you. And this example that I'm showing you is about mouse routines. So the focus of these slides is on building mouse skills, like identifying mouse shapes and their meaning, mouse actions and movements. And maybe we'll look at slide 6, Nick, if you could. So here is a specific word that you would be working with to teach one of the most foundational skills in using a mouse is hovering. In the teacher instructions, could you pull up the notes? Thanks, Nick. So the other thing that we did to make this easy to use for teachers is all of the instructions are in the notes, and we tried to keep them very succinct. In North Star, we always tried to write what you would actually say to your class or what you might actually say. Of course, we don't expect you to say it that way, but we think that it's easy to give you that language so that you don't have to try to interpret what language you might use. And all of the routines include an I do, so a model by the instructor, that's what you see here, a we do or a practice together, which would be on the next slide. Or it's still giving instruction here, so maybe on the next slide. Yep, here they're doing it together, so they practice together. And then after that, there's an opportunity for learners to model their mastery of the skill. And I'm going to pause for 1 second because I see a question from these resources are not in the North Star portal as of yet. We do plan to post these in the North Star portal and in our Literacy Minnesota Educator Resources page, but they don't live there yet. So right now they are just in the participant folder for this session. So you're getting kind of like a preview before anybody else has seen them, which is kind of exciting. So like I said, an I do, a we do, and a you do. And I also want to mention, so I don't remember how many slides are in this lesson, maybe like 20 or something. Or it looks like 34. So for this, you would never go through all of these slides at once. The idea is that you would just practice something like hover. You would just practice that skill with your students. And that would be a routine, and you would practice it, and then you would move on once they had built that skill, or maybe a couple skills. And then there's also checks for understanding that are built in on slide 17. You'll see that. That's an example. So here, this is an interactive piece where you can click, and you're teaching, of course, the vocabulary, you're teaching the images, which are the icons, which are really important. And you can modify this. So maybe you just want to teach 2 of these. Well, you can delete the other ones because you make a copy of this and you use it in whatever way works best for your group. So right now we have 6 of these sets or groups of practice items around our North Star curriculum standards of basic computer skills and internet basics. And we're also working on a using email one too. There's quite a bit of resources there if you think about incorporating these for just 10 to 20 minutes, or just as warm-ups or routines in your class. So I'm also going to show you, so where would you start with this? How do you know where you want to jump in? when using those Google Slides. We also developed some self-assessment rubrics. So another thing that we hear from a lot of our North Star sites, and we're very lucky that we have so much feedback. I also will say that we wanted to share that we piloted all these resources, of course, with some of our brilliant Literacy Minnesota teachers, but also who gave us feedback. But we also piloted it with 12 of our sites in 3 different states, just to get feedback on how this would work for them, what they want to see. And so it's really, really great that we're able to be responsive to people's needs. And of course, we would love to get your feedback too, if you use these. And in the rubric, there are teacher instructions at the top. They're very simple. You would just want to do like an assessment with your class. Of course, if you could work one-on-one with learners and see where they're at with skills that are listed on the bottom, that would be great. But one of our teachers had suggested doing a find someone who, which really allows learners to practice, and especially maybe after post instruction, you might want to do that, where they have the rubric, which is on the second page, and they do a mingle and ask each other and really check in to see their mastery of skills or what they still want to work on. So lots of different ways that you could use this. Again, these rubrics are all, there's one created for each topic. One of our teachers had suggested in this rubric here on the screen that they would rather break those skills apart even further. Like I can turn on my device would be one row, and I can turn off my device would be another. You can certainly do that and make it work best for your classroom and what you're teaching. But of course, with North Star, we say use the assessments as a place to gauge where students are at before instruction. But for beginning level students, that might be too much. And so just showing them, modeling a skill and having them self-assess how they feel about it. If they're able to do it and can show someone else, if they can do it, if they feel like they could repeat it, or maybe if they feel like they need practice on it. And then, of course, after instruction, you'd want to revisit this to celebrate a mastery of skills. And we can go back to the slide deck, I think, Nick. So as I mentioned, all of these extend to the North Star curriculum and English Unlocked. We won't go to those links right now, but I will show you how that works. But you don't need to use the North Star curriculum or English Unlocked to use the resources I'm talking about today. You could be using any curriculum and they would fit in. So how do you like find all this stuff and figure it out? The teacher guide is the place to go. This is what you'll find in the participant folder. It's very short. So I would recommend reading it first. You can then see it really, I hope that it explains everything that I just talked about. And includes detailed steps of ways that you could use these resources. Of course, you could use them however you want to use them, but there's suggestions in there. And the teacher guide is the place to grab all of the links to the rubrics and the lessons in Google Slides, and also all those application and extension activities that connect to our regular North Star curriculum, which is a little bit higher level, and also our English Unlocked curriculum. And within the teacher guide, I will show you the way that we organized this in topic tables, we're calling them, which is on the next slide. And so here, each topic table includes at the top a link to the rubric for that topic, so that we saw that earlier. And that's for pre and post assessment, along with a guiding lesson of how you might use it. The skills supported, so we're linking to our North Star digital literacy skills, the CCR skills that we're building in, and the TIF. And then in the blue column here, the second column, that's where you'll find the links to the specific slide decks in Google Slides. And then the last 2 columns, in the next one following the blue, is the English Unlocked curriculum. Those are lessons that pop up that support learners to be able to navigate, in this circumstance, to navigate a device in order to send, read, and respond to a message. So building in those typing skills, being able to navigate a screen, and being able to navigate their devices in order to communicate. And then what we did is we made we gave a contextual example, just like a mini lesson of how you could do that. And these do connect to English Unlocked, but you could really use these lessons just as an application of skill without the English Unlocked curriculum too. For example, I think in the home problems, learners are asked to share, to practice texting about a house problem that they're having, maybe with a landlord, for example. And then, of course, we link to North Star curriculum, which would be an extension of skills at a higher level where they're completing even more authentic practice and building their skills in a larger way. And if you're still not sure where to start, we also have on the next slide, there's a flow chart. This is also in the teacher guide. And this just describes a way that you could use this resource just in the way that I've already shared, but a little bit more detailed, really breaking it down. And I know it's small on the screen, but like I said, you'll be able to see this in the teacher guide. But pre-assessing is always important for any of the tools that Nick and I have shared today. You really want to find out what skills do learners already have, and how can they transfer some of those skills. So recognizing that learners might be confident with scrolling on their phone, and helping them to see how that scrolling also happens with a handheld mouse. But then also using rubrics to assess like what specific skills you want to target, choosing your digital literacy the topic that you want to search for. So looking at the resources that I just shared, or else you could use ed tech and search for what you're trying to teach, plan for integrating instruction. So when are you going to do it? How does it connect to the authentic context of ESL curriculum that you're teaching? Like how would it help learners to build language skills too? And how can you connect those pieces? And then access the routine, and you want to build practice through repetition, I think is what that one says. So remember that it's important to practice more often, and give learners multiple opportunities to feel confident in the skill, confident enough that they can guide someone else through it, and then extend the learning. So how will you, thank you, Nick. How will you help them to use it in an authentic context, or show them how they could build on that skill to do even more? So I will share, and then you repeat it. Yes, super important. Then repeat, pick another skill and do it again. On the next slide, this is just, I think I kind of already talked about this. Maybe I'll use the other sample scenario today, which is on the next slide. This is just another example of how you could use it. In this example, a teacher has observed that learners have gained confidence and accuracy in typing because maybe they were using the DART curriculum or the routine resources to practice knowing their keyboard. Learners self-assess their typing skills using the rubric and report confidence in most skills. So then using those typing skills, students have learned the teacher Sam plans a lesson where students type a text message via WhatsApp, letting a manager or teacher know that they can't come to work or class. And he provides, of course, a scaffolding prompt, which is really important. So that's just showing how you can practice those routines and practice those routines. And then once you see students gain confidence, assess them in a real way, like in the most authentic way you can, of course. And that shows digital resilience because they have to maybe move over from typing on a computer to typing within an app. And so that's definitely one of those wonderful productive struggle challenges that we want learners to work through. So we don't have a lot of time. And I think maybe because we don't have a lot of time, we should just skip to our wrap-up slide, if that's okay,
Alrighty.
Nick.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
And I'll just have you share in the chat maybe something that we said today that stuck with you, or another idea that you might have, maybe something about the resources that I just shared, what you would like to look into or dig into after this session. Great to hear that people are excited to check out these resources.
Yeah, lots of Dart. And again, the resource that Leah has developed will be available in the folder for this presentation as a preview. And then sooner or later, it will be uploaded to North Star and Literacy Minnesota, or just North Star.
It will be in the educator resources, so that's where you can find it. But if you have a North Star account, it will also live in the admin portal. Something important to note though about the participant folder, if you're downloading the resource that I was talking about, the teacher guide, you have to download it to access the links. I don't know if the PDF Google Doc will let you access the links, so just download it.
All right. Valerie is interested in DARMO, Digital Access and Resilience for Missourians, Missouris. I'm not sure what the term would be. Patricia Ross is interested in polling her students to see if there's an interest in doing some digital literacy in addition to other curriculum materials.
And yes, Jacqueline shared that you could spend days going over the resources. Yeah, there's a lot of things here.
Where's the third thing we talked about on this resource slide? We talked about digital access and resilience curriculum, DART, the EdTech integration strategy toolkit, which looks like an app. I also mentioned another resource, Digital Skills Library, is a parallel to this. Both are found on the EdTech website. And Leah talked about the Digital Routines Teacher Guide.
Thanks, Amy. We'll look at the participant folder again. I did put them in there, but I will double check on that to make sure that everything's working.
Yeah. They at least should be in there by the time that an email from Language and Literacy Institute comes out.
Yes, everything that we've talked about today, the slides for this session will be in the participant folder and you will be able to access the links through the slides. The teacher guide that I talked about will be a separate resource in the participant folder too. Thank you, everyone.
All right, so right before we head out, I know some people will have to run, but for those who can stay up to the last minute, I'm going to give a little advert for the Best or Ideal Consortium. The Ideal Consortium is an EdTech focused professional development group. We run cohorts to help people get to know various EdTech resources. These range from the EdTech 101 sessions, which cover things like Zoom, to the EdTech 103, which covers the same topics as what we covered today, how to build or how to plan a routine with a digital resource and use it. Feel free to email myself or a member of the statewide DL team for more curiosity or for more questions. All right, that was my little advert. For those who stayed on, thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.